My name is Frances. I'm 58 years old, and until last month, I thought I knew what my life was. 32 years of marriage to Gerald, a respected attorney in our community. Then came that dinner at my mother-in-law's house. One moment we were sitting around the table, the next my husband's saliva was dripping down my face as his mother and sister applauded. I walked away without a word. 5 minutes later, I made one phone call that made their entire house shake. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button as I share how I turned the tables on the family who tried to destroy me. I met Gerald when I was 26, working as an elementary school teacher with dreams of advancing my career in education. He was 30, handsome and ambitious, already making a name for himself at a prestigious law firm. We fell in love quickly, married within a year, and soon welcomed our son David and daughter Sarah into the world. Our early years together were genuinely happy. We supported each other's careers, Gerald climbing the legal ladder while I pursued my master's degree in education administration. By the time I was 40, I had achieved my goal of becoming an elementary school principal, a position I held with pride until my retirement 3 years ago. From the beginning, there was one persistent cloud over our marriage. Gerald's family, particularly his mother, Eleanor, and sister Diane. Eleanor was a widow who had raised her children in the upper echelons of society. At 79, she still maintained her imperious demeanor, treating everyone as though they were beneath her. Diane, now 50, had never married, choosing instead to live with her mother and manage the family's considerable wealth. They never approved of me. I wasn't from their social circle, didn't attend the right schools, and worst of all, I worked in public education, a profession they considered beneath their family's dignity. During family gatherings, Eleanor would introduce me as Gerald's wife who works at that public school, never bothering to remember my position or accomplishments. A principal is just a glorified babysitter, Diane once said at Thanksgiving dinner, loud enough for everyone to hear. In those early years, Gerald would defend me. Frances is shaping young minds, he'd say. Her work matters. But as time passed and his own status grew, something changed in him. The more successful he became, the more he seemed to absorb his family's values and prejudices. By our 15th anniversary, Gerald had become a senior partner at his firm. We moved to a larger home in an exclusive neighborhood, joined the country club, and began socializing with people Eleanor approved of. I watched as my husband gradually transformed into someone I barely recognized. The control began subtly. First, it was suggestions about my appearance. Wouldn't you prefer to wear the blue dress instead? Mother mentioned how professional it looked. Then came comments about my friends. Do you really need to keep in touch with Judith? She's just a police officer and her opinions are so common. Judith had been my best friend since college. We'd supported each other through everything. My career challenges, her rise to become the town's first female police chief, my children's teenage years, her divorce. When Gerald suggested I distance myself from her, I refused. It was one of the few battles I won. As Gerald's control increased, so did his scrutiny of our finances. Though I had my own income as a principal, he insisted on managing everything. You're too busy with school to worry about investments, he'd say. Let me handle it. Joint accounts became individual ones with my name removed. Properties we purchased together were mysteriously transferred solely to his name for tax purposes. I should have seen the signs. I should have questioned more. But after decades of marriage, you develop blind spots. You make excuses. He's just stressed from work. His mother's health scare has him worried about estate planning. He's always been good with money. 2 years ago, just before my retirement, I began noticing strange calls on Gerald's phone. Late-night text messages he'd quickly delete when I entered the room. Weekend work emergencies that required him to go to the office. The classic signs of an affair, though I had no concrete proof. Around the same time, Gerald began insisting I join him for weekly dinners at Eleanor's mansion. These gatherings had always been tense, but now they took on a different tone. Eleanor and Diane would exchange knowing glances. They'd ask probing questions about my retirement plans, my relationships with former colleagues, my health. Gerald would watch silently sometimes with what I now recognize as anticipation. Looking back, they were gathering intelligence, preparing for something I couldn't yet see, and I trusting full that I was walked right into their trap. Last month, Gerald announced that his mother wanted to host a special dinner to celebrate my birthday, which was unusual since Eleanor had never acknowledged my birthday before. Despite my skepticism, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps after all these years, she was finally accepting me into the family. Mom has been planning this for weeks, Gerald said, his voice uncharacteristically enthusiastic. She wants to make it special for you. I spent days preparing for this dinner. I bought a new dress, a sophisticated navy blue that flattered my figure without being showy. I had my hair styled, chose jewelry that was elegant yet understated. I even purchased a small gift for Eleanor, a vintage brooch I'd found at an antique shop that matched one I'd seen in old family photos. You look beautiful, Gerald said as we got ready that evening. He kissed my cheek, something he hadn't done spontaneously in years. Tonight's going to be memorable. During the drive to Eleanor's estate, Gerald seemed almost giddy. He kept mentioning a big surprise that awaited me. I allowed myself to imagine what it might be. Perhaps they had finally decided to include me in the family trust Gerald often mentioned. Maybe Eleanor had decided to pass down some family heirloom to me as a symbol of acceptance. After 32 years, was I finally going to be embraced as a true member of the family? You seem nervous, Gerald noted, patting my hand as we turned onto his mother's street. Just excited, I replied. It's not every day your mother-in-law throws you a birthday celebration. Throughout the drive, Gerald's phone kept buzzing with text messages. Each time he'd glance at it and smile secretively. Last-minute details, he explained when I questioned him. I thought about our life together, the good years when we were young parents supporting each other's dreams, the vacations with David and Sarah, watching them grow into amazing adults. David had followed his father into law, but chose public defense work instead of corporate law. Sarah had become an accountant with a knack for forensic accounting. Both had moved to different states for their careers, but we remained close. I imagined a future where Gerald and I might reconnect, rebuild what we'd lost. Perhaps his mother's acceptance would remove a barrier between us. Perhaps we could rediscover each other in our retirement years. The day before, I'd had coffee with Judith, sharing my hopes for the evening. Francis, I've known that family for as long as you have, she said, her police chief instincts clearly on alert. They don't change. Be careful. You're too suspicious. I laughed. It's just a birthday dinner. Just keep your phone on, she insisted. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I dismissed her concerns as professional paranoia. After all, what could possibly go wrong at a family dinner? As we pulled into Eleanor's circular driveway, I noticed several cars I didn't recognize. Are there other guests? I asked. Gerald's smile tightened slightly. Just a few close friends of the family. Mother wanted to make it special. I should have listened to the alarm bells ringing in my head. Instead, I straightened my dress, checked my lipstick in the visor mirror, and prepared to enter what I foolishly believed would be a celebration in my honor. The moment we stepped into Eleanor's marble-floored foyer, I sensed something was wrong. There were no birthday decorations, no wrapped presents, no champagne waiting to be popped. Instead, Eleanor and Diane stood rigidly by the grand staircase, dressed in formal attire that seemed excessive even for them. You're late, Eleanor said, ignoring me completely and addressing Gerald. Everyone's waiting in the dining room. Happy birthday, Diane added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That dress is brave for a woman your age. I felt Gerald's hand press against my lower back, guiding me toward the dining room. Mother's prepared all your favorites, he said, though I noticed he didn't specify what those might be. Eleanor's home was a showcase of old money and older pretensions. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings. Antique furniture that was never meant to be sat upon lined the hallways. Oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors glared down from gilded frames. The place always felt more like a museum than a home. The dining room continued this theme of opulent discomfort. A massive mahogany table stretched beneath another chandelier set with fine china, sterling silver, and crystal glasses. Seated around it were four people I recognized as partners from Gerald's firm and their spouses. Surprise, Gerald whispered, though it wasn't clear what the surprise was supposed to be. Throughout the appetizer course, a seafood dish I'm actually allergic to, certainly not a favorite, the conversation flowed around me rather than including me. Gerald's colleagues discussed recent cases, legal strategies, and firm politics while their spouses gossiped about people I didn't know. Frances just retired from being a school principal, Eleanor announced during a lull, as if introducing a curious specimen. She worked with underprivileged children. How charitable, one of the wives commented with a patronizing smile. Though the school was in the good part of town, Diane added quickly. Not truly underprivileged, Gerald chuckled. Frances always did have a soft spot for lost causes. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment and anger. These were the accomplishments of my life being dismissed as charity work. I had turned around a struggling school, raised test scores, implemented innovative programs. I had made a difference in hundreds of children's lives, yet here in this room, none of that mattered. During the main course, I excused myself to use the restroom. As I passed Gerald's study, I noticed the door was ajar. Inside on his desk lay a stack of legal documents. Curiosity led me to peek inside, where I caught glimpses of phrases like dissolution of marriage and financial settlement. My heart pounded as I hurried to the bathroom, locked the door, and splashed cold water on my face. Was Gerald planning to divorce me? On my birthday, with an audience of his colleagues, when I returned to the table, everyone fell silent, watching me with strange expressions. Anticipation, pity, amusement. Gerald's phone buzzed again. He checked it, smiled, and nodded slightly to his mother. I tried to salvage the evening by sharing stories about my grandchildren, about the volunteer work I'd begun since retirement, about the travel Gerald and I had discussed. Each attempt was met with polite but dismissive responses, or worse, knowing glances between my husband and his family. Gerald kept checking his watch, as if waiting for a specific time. His mother and sister seemed to be suppressing excitement, and all around me his colleagues watched like an audience awaiting the main event. By the time dessert arrived, not the chocolate cake I prefer, but Eleanor's favorite lemon tart, my stomach was in knots. Something was very wrong, and I was the only one who didn't know what it was. After dessert, Eleanor tapped her crystal glass with a silver spoon, commanding attention. Before we conclude our lovely dinner, I believe Gerald has something important to discuss with Frances. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to my husband, who stood with practiced courtroom confidence. Frances, he began, his voice taking on the formal tone he used when addressing juries. We've been married for 32 years. That's a long time to maintain a pretense. I stared at him, uncomprehending. Pretense. Gerald signaled to Diane, who produced a leather portfolio and handed it to him. From it, he extracted a document and placed it before me. This is a petition for divorce, he said calmly. I've had it prepared for some time, waiting for the right moment. My colleagues are here as witnesses and to provide legal support. The room began to spin. I looked down at the document, the words blurring before my eyes. You'll find everything in order, Gerald continued. According to our prenuptial agreement, you're entitled to your personal possessions and a modest settlement reflecting your contributions to the marriage. Prenuptial agreement, I whispered. We never had one. Eleanor laughed sharply. Of course you did, dear. You signed it the day before the wedding. Gerald insisted. I never signed anything like that, I said, my voice gaining strength. This is a lie. Gerald slid another document across the table. Your signature, Frances, witnessed and notarized. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine, but I had never seen this document before in my life. While we're clearing the air, Diane interjected, you should know that Gerald has transferred most of your joint assets to Mother and me for safekeeping. Perfectly legal given the financial power of attorney you granted him. I never gave him power of attorney, I said, my hands beginning to shake. Another document you apparently don't remember signing, Eleanor said with mock sympathy. Perhaps you should have paid more attention to what was put in front of you over the years. Gerald's expression hardened. There's more, Francis. I think you should know that I've been seeing someone else. Kathleen, one of the partner's wives, supplied helpfully. His executive assistant, such a bright young woman. 3 years now, Gerald said, not bothering to deny it. She understands me in ways you never could. Diane produced an envelope and spilled its contents onto the table. Photographs of Gerald with a woman who couldn't be more than 30 caught in intimate moments on what appeared to be a yacht in a hotel room entering our home when I was away visiting our daughter. We thought you might contest the divorce, Eleanor explained, so we took the precaution of gathering evidence, not just of Gerald's relationship with Kathleen, but of your own indiscretions. What indiscretions? I demanded. There have been none. The frequent meetings with Chief Judith Morris, Diane said smugly. Your overnight trips to visit your daughter. The unexplained withdrawals from your personal account. They were twisting everything. My friendship with Judith, my visits to Sarah, the money I'd been setting aside for a surprise anniversary trip. In their narrative, I was the unfaithful one, the deceiver. This is absurd, I said, looking around the table at the strangers who were witnessing my humiliation. Why are you doing this? Why the audience? Why tonight? Efficiency, Gerald replied coldly. My colleagues can process everything immediately. As for tonight, well, I've always found birthdays to be excessively sentimental. Consider this my gift to you, clarity about your future. Eleanor leaned forward. You'll need to vacate the house immediately, of course. We've had your personal items packed. They're in your car already. My home, I gasped. You expect me to leave my home tonight? It's Gerald's home, Diane corrected. Purchased with his money titled in his name. You've been living there on his charity. I looked at the faces around me. Gerald's smug satisfaction, Eleanor and Diane's vindictive glee, the uncomfortable but unwilling to interfere expressions of the others. 32 years of marriage was being erased in a single dinner with an audience to ensure my complete humiliation. I won't sign these papers, I said, pushing them away. This prenuptial agreement is a forgery. I'll fight this in court. Gerald's smile didn't waver. With what money, Francis, your retirement pension against my legal team? Be reasonable. The courts won't look kindly on fraud, I insisted, or asset hiding, or forgery. Prove it, Eleanor challenged. It will be your word against ours. And we have witnesses, documentation, evidence collected over years. Years, I repeated, the full scope of their conspiracy finally dawning on me. You've been planning this for years. Since the day you married my son, Eleanor admitted coldly. I always knew you weren't good enough for him. It was just a matter of waiting for the right time to correct his mistake. The room fell silent as I absorbed the magnitude of their betrayal. 32 years of my life had been a calculated deception. Every dinner at Eleanor's, every legal document Gerald had asked me to sign for tax purposes, every dismissive comment about my career, all part of a long game to eventually discard me with nothing. I stood slowly, steadying myself against the table. I won't sign anything tonight. I need time to review these documents with my own attorney. Gerald laughed, a harsh, unfamiliar sound. Your attorney? Who would that be? Some public defender friend of your son's. Don't be pathetic, Francis. I've indulged this discussion long enough, I said, gathering what dignity I could. I'm leaving now. We can continue this conversation through proper legal channels. I turned to go, but Gerald moved quickly around the table, grabbing my arm with surprising force. His face had transformed into something I didn't recognize, contorted with rage and contempt. You're not walking away from this, he hissed. You'll sign tonight and you'll disappear quietly, or I'll make sure everyone in this town knows what a fraud you are. Let go of me, I said quietly. 32 years. He spat, his grip tightening. 32 years I've tolerated your mediocrity, your embarrassing career, your common friends. I've built everything we have. Everything, and you think you deserve half. The room watched in stunned silence as Gerald's carefully cultivated facade crumbled. This wasn't the respected attorney they knew. This was something darker, something that had been hiding beneath the surface of our marriage for decades. "You're hurting me," I said, still maintaining my composure. "Hurting you." Gerald's voice rose to a shout. "You have no idea what hurt is. Try building a life only to have it dragged down by someone who should have remained a kindergarten teacher. Try explaining to clients why your wife doesn't fit in at firm events. Try listening to your mother point out year after year that you married beneath you." Eleanor stood now, her eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "Tell her, Gerald. Tell her everything." "You were convenient." Gerald snarled, his face inches from mine. "Young enough to have my children educated enough to not embarrass me, completely attractive enough to serve a purpose. But never ever what I really wanted or deserved." I looked into the eyes of the man I had loved for over 3 decades and saw nothing familiar. Had he always been this person? Had I been blind? Or had he simply hidden it well? "If that's how you feel," I said quietly, "then you should have ended this years ago. And give you half of what I built, watch you walk away with my money, my properties, my investments." Gerald's voice had taken on a manic quality. "No, we had to do it right. We had to make sure you got nothing." I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Mother Diane and I," he confirmed. "The family you were never truly part of." Something in me broke at that moment. Not my spirit, but the last thread of attachment to this man and his toxic family. I felt a strange calm descend, a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. "Let go of my arm," I said for the final time. Instead, Gerald's face contorted with rage. He pulled me closer and did something I could never have imagined in all our years together. He spat directly in my face. The warm saliva hit my cheek and slid down toward my jaw as the room collectively gasped. But the true horror came a moment later when Eleanor and Diane began to applaud. "Finally," Eleanor said with satisfaction, "he finally shows her what she's worth." Diane's laughter joined her mother's applause. The look on her face, "Oh, Gerald, you should have done this years ago." I stood frozen, Gerald's saliva on my face, the sound of their approval ringing in my ears. The partners and their wives looked horrified, but made no move to intervene. They were witnesses to my complete debasement, and they would do nothing. In that crystallized moment of perfect clarity, I saw not just this night, but every slight, every dismissal, every manipulation of the past 3 decades. I saw the pattern of control, the gradual isolation, the careful documentation of a narrative that painted me as unworthy. With deliberate slowness, I took a napkin from the table and wiped my face. I made no sound, shed no tear, showed no emotion that could give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I looked each of them in the eye, Gerald, Eleanor, Diane, memorizing their expressions of contempt and triumph. Then, without a word, I turned and walked from the room down the hallway through the front door. I heard Gerald call after me, his voice suddenly uncertain at my lack of hysterics. I didn't look back. I kept walking until I reached my car, my own car that Gerald hadn't managed to take from me yet. Only when I was inside with the doors locked did I allow myself a single deep breath. They expected me to run away, to disappear, as instructed, to be so broken by their cruelty that I would accept whatever scraps they offered. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They never had. I took out my phone, my hand steady despite everything, and made a call that would shake that house to its foundations. "Judith, it's Francis. I need you right now, and I need you to bring your badge." As I sat in my car outside Eleanor's mansion, I shared every detail of what had just happened. 30 years of friendship meant Judith didn't question, didn't hesitate. "Stay where you are," she said, her police chief voice in full effect. I'm bringing a team. Don't go back inside. I have no intention of going back in, I assured her, but I'm not leaving either. While waiting, I made 2 more calls to David and Sarah. My children needed to know what was happening, not just the night's events, but the years of financial maneuvering their father had engaged in. Mom, I've been worried about this, David admitted. Dad asked me to review some documents last year that seemed suspicious, but he claimed they were for a client. Sarah was more direct. I've been tracking Dad's accounts for 2 years, she confessed. Ever since you mentioned those strange transfers, I didn't want to worry you until I had proof. My brilliant, observant children had seen what I'd been unwilling to acknowledge. They hadn't wanted to break my heart with their suspicions, just as I tried to protect them from my growing concerns about their father. As I ended these calls, I opened the glove compartment and removed a small external hard drive I'd kept hidden there for 5 years. On it was every document Gerald had ever asked me to sign, every bank statement I'd managed to secretly copy, every tax return, property deed, and investment record I could access. Gerald had made a critical mistake in his planning. He had assumed I was exactly what he and his family believed me to be, naive, trusting, and financially ignorant. He had forgotten that I managed school budgets for decades, that I supervised staff and resources, that I had been trained to notice discrepancies and keep meticulous records. For 5 years, I had documented every suspicious transaction, every unexplained absence, every inconsistency in our finances. I had done this not because I planned to leave him, but because a growing sense of self-preservation had finally broken through my denial. When Gerald began transferring assets 3 years ago, I started my own contingency fund. Small withdrawals. He wouldn't notice an account in my maiden name, investments made through Sarah as my proxy. Not enough to match what he was hiding, but enough to survive if my worst fears proved true. I had also documented something else, something Gerald, Eleanor, and Diane never suspected I knew about. In his arrogance, Gerald had used our home office for all his business, including some clients whose payments never appeared on the firm's books. As an attorney specializing in real estate and corporate law, Gerald had access to investment opportunities that operated in legal gray areas. Some, I suspected, crossed the line into money laundering. Headlights appeared on the street. Judith's police SUV, followed by 2 patrol cars. As she approached my vehicle, I rolled down the window. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Once we go in, there's no turning back." "I've given them 32 years, I replied. "I'm not giving them another minute." Judith nodded, understanding perfectly. "Let's do this by the book. I have a warrant based on the assault you've reported and suspected financial fraud." "You moved fast," I observed. "I've had this ready for months," she admitted, "just waiting for you to make the call." Inside Eleanor's mansion, the scene that unfolded was beyond even my imaginings. Gerald, Eleanor, and Diane were still in the dining room, the legal team hurriedly gathering documents as if they sensed their plans were unraveling. When Judith entered in full uniform, flanked by officers, Gerald's face drained of color. "What is the meaning of this?" Eleanor demanded. "You can't just barge in here. Chief Judith Morris County Police?" Judith announced formally. "We're here to investigate reports of assault and financial crimes." Gerald attempted to regain his composure. "This is absurd. My wife and I had a minor disagreement during a difficult discussion about our divorce." "A disagreement that involved you spitting in her face?" Judith asked coldly. "In front of witnesses?" "It wasn't like that," one of the partners began, but fell silent when Eleanor interrupted. "I recorded it," she announced proudly, holding up her phone. "To protect Gerald from any false accusations she might make." Judith's expression was one of professional satisfaction as she accepted the phone. "Thank you for providing evidence of the assault, Mrs. Anderson. That's very helpful." Eleanor's smugness faltered. "What?" While this exchange occurred, I quietly approached Gerald's study with another officer. Inside, we found the documents I had glimpsed earlier. Not just divorce papers, but records of asset transfer shell companies and offshore accounts I had suspected but couldn't prove. When we returned to the dining room, Gerald was attempting to intimidate Judith with legal jargon and threats. "You know nothing about our financial arrangements," he was saying. "This is a private family matter." "Actually," I interjected, holding up my hard drive, "I know everything. 5 years of documentation, and Sarah knows even more." At the mention of our daughter, the forensic accountant, Gerald's face went from pale to ashen. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting myself," I corrected, "just as you've been protecting yourself all these years." The next hours passed in a blur of legal procedures. The forged prenuptial agreement was seized as evidence. Eleanor's phone video of Gerald assaulting me was downloaded as evidence of both the assault and the conspiracy. The legal documents in Gerald's study were cataloged and removed. Most damning of all were the records of clients whose payments had been routed through Eleanor's accounts to avoid taxation, evidence of money laundering that implicated not just Gerald, but his mother and sister as well. By morning, Gerald, Eleanor, and Diane had all been arrested on multiple charges: assault, conspiracy, forgery, fraud, money laundering. The legal colleagues who had come to witness my humiliation became witnesses to their downfall instead. As the police led Gerald away in handcuffs, he finally looked at me with something other than contempt: fear. "What have you done?" he whispered. "I didn't do this," I replied calmly. "You did, all of you. I just made sure you couldn't get away with it." As dawn broke over Eleanor's mansion, I stood on the driveway watching police vehicles pull away. Judith approached, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be." 1 year later, I'm sitting in the garden of my new home, a comfortable cottage near David's family with a guest room always ready for when Sarah visits. The flowers are blooming, the birds are singing, and for the first time in decades, I feel completely at peace. Gerald, Eleanor, and Diane are still navigating the legal consequences of their actions. The money laundering charges alone carried significant penalties. The divorce proceedings handled by David's colleague resulted in a settlement that acknowledged the forged prenuptial agreement and awarded me my fair share of our marital assets, those that weren't seized by the government at least. The first months after that night were the hardest. Despite my outward composure, I struggled with grief, betrayal, and shame. How had I not seen who Gerald truly was? How had I allowed myself to be manipulated for so many years? The questions haunted me through sleepless nights and tearful days. Healing came gradually. A therapist helped me understand that victims of long-term emotional abuse often don't recognize what's happening until they're free of it. Friends I had neglected during my marriage welcomed me back with open arms. Colleagues from my school reached out with support and reminded me of the positive impact I'd had on countless lives. Most healing of all was rebuilding relationships with David and Sarah. We had always been close, but now there was a new honesty between us. They shared their long-held concerns about their father's behavior and my seeming acceptance of it. I shared my struggles to maintain the image of a perfect family while feeling increasingly isolated and controlled. "I stayed because I thought it was best for you," I admitted during one heart-wrenching conversation. "We would have been fine if you'd left," Sarah assured me. "Seeing you stand up for yourself now has taught us more than years of watching you endure." 6 months after that fateful dinner, I began conducting workshops for women on recognizing financial abuse and protecting themselves. My story resonated with more people than I could have imagined. Women of all ages approached me after each session, sharing similar experiences or recognizing warning signs in their own relationships. "You walked away without saying a word," one woman told me admiringly. "That must have taken incredible strength." "Silence isn't always weakness," I explained. "Sometimes it's the most powerful response to cruelty. It denies them the reaction they're seeking." That's the lesson I share most often now, that dignity can't be taken from you, only surrendered. That preparation and documentation are forms of self-love when dealing with manipulative people. That it's never too late to reclaim your life. I don't hate Gerald or his family. Hatred would still give them power over me. I don't forgive them either. Their actions were calculated and cruel, designed to leave me destitute and broken. Instead, I've reached a state of indifference that feels like true freedom. They no longer matter in my story. What matters now is the life I'm building, the friendships I'm nurturing, the family gatherings where laughter comes easily and no one walks on eggshells, the volunteer work that gives purpose to my days, the simple pleasures of reading in my garden, taking long walks, and sleeping soundly without fear. Sometimes I think about that moment when Gerald's saliva hit my face and his mother and sister applauded. It no longer hurts as it once did. Instead, I see it as the moment of my liberation, the instant when the illusion I'd lived with for decades finally shattered completely, allowing me to see the truth and act on it. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with you, remember this: no one can take your worth unless you give them permission. No one can diminish your light unless you let them. And it's never ever too late to walk away from people who don't value you, even if they're family, even if they're your spouse of 32 years. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who betrayed you? How did you find the strength? Share your story in the comments below. And if this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening, and remember, your dignity is non-negotiable. Your future is yours to reclaim. And sometimes the quietest exit creates the loudest impact.